Hello, and thank you for downloading Witness from the BBC World Service. It's more than 40 years since the trial of one of the world's most notorious mass murderers, Charles Manson. Chloe Hadjimatheou reports.
It's spring 1971, and the most high-profile court case in American history to date has just come to an end. Charles Manson has been found guilty of instructing his followers to brutally murder 8 people in Los Angeles. The gory deaths shocked the nation.
I mean, the very thought of young girls dressed in black, armed with sharp knives, entering the homes of total strangers in the middle of the night and mercilessly stabbing them to death, where the victims are screaming out into the night for their lives. It's the nightmarish nature of these murders that terrified so many people.
Vincent Bugliosi was the prosecutor in the Manson murder case. The facts were these. In the early hours of Saturday, August the 9th, 1969, Hollywood actress Sharon Tate and 4 other people were murdered at a film star's hideaway on a hillside above Los Angeles. Sharon, the wife of film director Roman Polanski, was 8.5 months pregnant when she was killed. The following night, Leno LaBianca, a supermarket owner who lived 10 miles away, was murdered with his wife Rosemary in their home. At both murder scenes, words scrawled in blood were left on the walls. The crimes struck fear into the hearts of Los Angeles residents.
They were so random. There didn't appear to be any conventional, traditional motive like robbery or burglary or a drug transaction gone bad, just totally at random. And this instilled enormous fear throughout the LA basin, particularly in Bel Air and Beverly Hills, the area where the Tate murders occurred. It didn't just shake Los Angeles, but it shook the entire nation, because before these murders, no one identified hippies with violence and murder. What did you identify them with? Well, drugs, free love, but not violence and murder. Then the Manson family comes along looking like hippies, living like hippies, but what they were up to, of course, was murder.
The Manson family, as they were known, were not a family at all. They were Charles Manson's followers, most of them young women who'd been living with him on a California ranch.
There's no question that Manson had a certain magnetism and charisma to him and the world in which he moved, i.e. the offbeat, dropout world of the hippie. Kids seemed to naturally gravitate towards him, and within a short period of time they were following him. Now, to ask me to explain that, I can't, but it was there. He was a colorful character, of course, with his long hair and the swastika on his forehead.
Charles Manson was a petty criminal, and he'd spent much of his adult life until then in prison, but he had harboured hopes of making it as a rock star, and in 1967 he moved to LA, where he befriended the drummer for the Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson, who helped Manson record his first track.
Cease to exist, just come and say you love me. Give up your world. Come on, you can't be.
He was a frustrated singer-guitarist, a pseudo-philosopher, a megalomaniac, but more importantly than anything else, he was a evil, sophisticated con man who cleverly hid behind the common image of a hippie that of being peace-loving, but he was not peace-loving. He had a passion and a lust for death and murder.
Having failed to make it as a musician, he isolated himself on the ranch, surrounded by his followers. There, Manson developed a twisted philosophy of racism, death and destruction, inspired, he claimed, by the Beatles.
Helter Skelter, is a title of a Beatles song in the White Album, which Manson played over and over and over again. But to Manson, it was a term that he used to describe the last final destructive war on the face of this earth among men, Armageddon. He told his family that they could ignite this war by committing these murders and framing the black man. He believed that the black man was going to win this war because he said the black men had been stepped on by the white man for centuries, so now it was their turn to take over. Manson was a racist, and he believed that blacks were subhuman. he felt they would never know how to handle the reins of power. They'll have to turn over the reins of power to those white people who had survived helter-skelter, i.e. Charles Manson and his family. So he viewed himself and his family as the ultimate beneficiaries of this black-white war.
Charles Manson managed to persuade young women from all American homes to believe that his bizarre ideas made sense. Even after they'd heard the details of the gruesome murders during the trial, he maintained his spell over them. One girl spoke to the BBC from the ranch.
I came here with a whole bunch of my friends because we weren't compatible with the smog in the city and the screeching of the cars and people running around wanting this and wanting that.
How do you remember Charles Manson?
Same as he is now, as he always has been and always will be. Happy, peaceful, beautiful. And really, he's the most gentle person anyone would want to meet.
When it came to the trial, though, things were far from straightforward, because Charles Manson hadn't actually killed anyone himself. He'd simply ordered these brainwashed young women to do it for him. And as public prosecutor, Vincent felt there was a great deal at stake.
There was no question in my mind that if he got off, he was just going to continue to kill. I mean, he was going to kill as many people as he could. So I was working, 7 days a week to make sure he was not set free. The problem is that Manson did not physically participate in these murders. At the actual moment of the murders, he was not present. So I had to bring him in by way of circumstantial evidence. And therefore, I told the jury, when the words helter-skelter were found printed in blood at the murder scene, I said that's tantamount to Manson's fingerprints being found at the murder scene. The other way I connected him with the murders was to show his complete domination over his family. The other members of the family were slavishly obedient to him. And therefore, if Manson's co-defendants committed these murders, he must have been behind these murders. And in the courtroom, for instance, frequently he'd turn around and he'd start staring at a spectator. And the spectator eventually would get up and walk out. He stared at the jury, and he and I had several staring sessions. One of them went on for around 20 minutes, actually.
Who won?
Well, it was extremely difficult for me, not because I was looking at Manson, but because I'm not accustomed to looking at anything for 20 minutes. And eventually, I noticed his hands started shaking a little bit, and that allowed me to talk to him and say, "What's wrong, Charlie? You afraid of me?" And he says, "No, I'm not afraid of you. It's crazy." He said, but Yossi, he says, "You got the wrong idea about me. You think I'm a bad guy." And I said, "Well, I'm sure, Charlie, that you must have some good qualities to you. I don't think all these kids would have followed you if you didn't have something good about you." But I said, "Tell me, Charlie, where did you get this crazy idea that other people didn't want to live?" And he just gave me a little smile, and that was the end of that.
Charles Manson was found guilty, and the courtroom sat in silence as the sentence was about to be read out.
That's probably the most suspenseful moment of the whole trial, because you don't know what the clerk's going to say, death or life. I looked over at Manson, and his hands were trembling. Now, here's the guy that always promoted fear, right? But yet, when they came back with the death penalty, he was in fear. He wanted to save his own life very badly.
The following year, the Supreme Court of California temporarily eliminated the death penalty, and Manson's sentence was automatically converted to life in prison. Earlier this year, his application for parole was denied for the 12th time, and it won't be reconsidered for another 15 years, by which time Charles Manson will be 92.
Chloe Hadjimatheou. For details of our complete range of downloads and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.